I'll just buy it just to experiment and understand it better and see if it really fits my style or not. Because I still strongly believe that you never really know if something is right for you until you've owned it for a little while.
So on two-handed watches, right? How are you finding the Centre 100th anniversary watch?
It's one of my favorite watches ever.
That's a strong statement.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. I would probably never let this go. Like, it just wraps so perfectly around the wrist. The color's fantastic. The fact that they use parchment for the dial instead of a white, it makes a huge difference. I didn't like the strap they had on originally, so I made a strap for myself out of this kind of textured calf with a contrast stitch. And in a configuration like this, like, you can wear it casually too. It's lovely.
So yeah, I think the cream colored dial really hits the spot here. Like, it just gives you that vintage feel. The black indices also contrast very nice with it, together with the brigade hands.
Yeah, man. Congrats on the THC one too. That's good.
Oh, thank you. I think the THC one is known to be a bit more out there and unlike a very conventional idea of what you think of as a Cartier, right? And so this is the crazy one, and this is a more conventional Centre.
I think that's one of the reasons why I like Cartier. It's still, despite the fact that it has a very defined look, it's very flexible. It can still suit a lot of different aesthetics, a lot of different styles. You can be a rap star wearing a Cartier, or you can be in a boardroom wearing a Cartier, and it would still be a Cartier. Yeah.
So do you think that with the popularity of sports watches over the past few years, right, people will start to return to like a more dressy style in terms of clothing and also in terms of watches itself?
I mean, I don't know, to be honest. It does feel like there's a little bit of a return to a more classic, formal style of dress, but I think we've been a little too spoiled the last few years. Like, everyone's so used to stretchy pants, stretchy materials, that it's hard to fully come back from that. So I think that the needle of like formality is drifting more and more towards casual. Oh, sorry, the needle of like dress style is still continuing to drift. It will continue to drift more towards casual. God, I butchered that.
What about watches though?
For watches, I'm glad that people are waking up to the fact that, smaller watches are oftentimes better. And it goes back to the idea of comfort for me. Like, I do think that a lot of people, they put on like a heavy sport watch and suddenly they're like, oh, this thing is quite big. It's quite clumsy. Like, I actually have to be a little bit careful not to like knock into stuff. Whereas like when you have something that's like thin and close to the body, it sort of melts into your body and that's it, you're done. It feels much more like a part of you.
I actually think this is very true for sports watches like Rolex or AP. Like, when you look at the modern Rolex or modern AP, the bracelet, the case is usually quite chunky, very hefty, right? But when you go back to like the 90s stuff, like, this stuff, or even like a 5-digit or 4-digit Rolex sports watch, those feel so different and so much more wearable to me compared to like the modern 6-digit stuff.
I think so. I mean, that's sort of the current style, the prevailing style of Rolex, right? Slightly wider lugs. I actually, on the smaller diameters, don't mind the thickness too much. It's kind of charming. At this point, I'm like, oh, it's just part of the look.
Yeah, I think Rolex hides the thickness very well. Somehow with the case design, the case back that's like, a little bit domed. But yeah, I just think somehow the modern cases feel very chunky to me and makes it a little bit tougher to wear in my view.
Yeah, I think there's also a few reasons for that. Ultra slim movements are not as much of a thing as they used to be. Before there were a lot of brands competing for like making great ultra thin watches, whereas now you've got Bulgari, who's really probably the best known for it. And then you got Piaget and the Altiplano series, which unfortunately is not as popular as really it should be, because those are great watches too. But beyond that, like, you know,
and now Richard Mille.
Now Richard Mille, that's true actually.
Taking it
got
to the
Richard Mille
extreme,
credit
right?
card, yeah. People want automatic watches. People don't want manual watches. And if you have a peripheral winding rotor, obviously it has to be a little bit thicker. People are starting to develop micro rotors, which is cool. But at the same time, I think among watch manufacturers, there's this feeling of like, oh, we need to keep upping some spec, right? And so one of the specs that always got upgraded over the years is power reserve. And as your power reserve increases, the size of your mainspring barrel has to increase. And so how do you fit like a 72-hour mainspring alongside a micro rotor? I don't think you actually can, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
For me though, like, I don't really care that much about power reserve. Like I'm so used to manual anyways, I'm used to winding my watch out of habit. Even if it's an automatic, I'll still give it a few winds when I start the day. You know?
So maybe there's just a disconnection between how watch manufacturers see their product. Maybe they see, oh, we need to increase the capability of the watch itself, whereas for the wearers, it's more about how it feels on the wrist, how convenient it is to wear, how it makes them feel when they put it on.
I think it's a tough marketing issue, because when you say this has a 72-hour power reserve, that's a tangible difference. This watch is 72 hours, this watch is 48 hours, right? That's a very obvious advantage, whereas it's hard to explain to a customer, oh, this will feel better and this will not feel as good.
I mean, I think in a way Cartier does this very well, right? Because they've managed to kind of push the focus a little bit more towards the aesthetic and the design, which others may not be as good at, and it kind of makes you forget about the functionality. Like this watch itself has like what, 30-something hours of power reserve, and like I don't care. Nobody who has one cares, right? Because it's not the point about the watch.
I mean, this is a watch that will appeal to people who wear like the power reserve is just not an issue. It's just not as helpful.
So going back to collecting, right? So I can imagine you probably have a very big collection of clothing yourself. Do you find that, like, are there any similarities in the way that you collect clothing versus how you collect watches?
No one's asked me that either, actually. These are good questions. I mean, at this point, I collect clothing almost experimentally, in that if I see a fabric or a style that I'm kind of curious about, I'll just buy it just to experiment and understand it better and see if it really fits my style or not. Because I still strongly believe that you never really know if something is right for you until you've owned it for a little while, right? So, you know, my closet has many great items, but also has a fair few like pieces that just didn't work out. I made it, I thought I'd like it, didn't like it, it's hanging there. Eventually it'll get given to a friend or whatever.
In tailored clothing, right, I think a lot of people talk about building a capsule wardrobe. Do you have an idea of like what would be an ideal capsule watch collection for you?
If it was 2 watches,
let's say you can have like 5 up to.
I think there are a couple watches, some of them are on this table too, that I'm just like, these are things that I just like cannot live without. The 56175 in some form, I would find it hard not to have that. The 3970 in some form, I would find it not to have that. Probably the 96 or maybe the Centre. I would definitely always want one of those two. And I do love Explorers. I mean, I would like to bring an Explorer back into my collection. I'm actually missing an Explorer right now.
1016?
No, I'd buy the modern one.
Okay.
The modern one's good. I'd buy the modern one. Actually, the Tudor Black Bay. Tudor Black Bay 54, I would sub that for an Explorer right now. Actually, the Tudor Black Bay 54 is great. I do love that watch. Yeah.
Well, let's see if they come up with a new color this year.
Let's see. Yeah.